Good morning, everyone. I'm Beatriz Rodriguez, Director of the North Carolina AgrAbility Partnership, and this is the first session for today, and is about farming with cognitive and visual impairments. Our presenters today are Jobeth Rath, the Director of Workforce Development with Goodwill of the Finger Lakes Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, ABVI. Tess McKeel, Workforce Navigator, Goodwill of the Finger Lakes, ABVI. Margie Bendy Sandy, Certified Vision Rehabilitation Therapist, Goodwill of the Finger Lakes, ABVI. I leave you with Jobeth, Tess, and Margie.
Thank you, Betty. I'm going to start off, and as Betty said, I'm Tess McKeel. I work for Goodwill of the Finger Lakes. We're going to be talking today about farming with cognitive and visual impairments. And again, as Betty said, our other presenters are Margie Vandy Sandy, who is a certified vision rehabilitation therapist, and Jobeth Rath, who is the director of our workforce development, and she is also part of our National AgrAbility project. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Goodwill before we get into that. There are 156 independent Goodwill regions under the Goodwill Industries International, which we are one of. Each Goodwill offers job training, employment placement, and other services to people who have disabilities, lack education, job experience, or face any multitude of barriers to employment. Each local Goodwill is a flexible and sustainable social enterprise that funds job training, employment placement services, and other community programs through the sale of the donated goods in their retail stores and also online. In 2019, Goodwill helped over 25 million individuals through mobile and online services and nearly 1.5 million people in face-to-face services to connect with employment opportunities through programs to assist individuals in overcoming their barriers. So Goodwill's mission is to enhance the dignity and quality of life of individuals. Excuse me. Whoops, I clicked, sorry. Helping people, families, strengthening communities, eliminating barriers to opportunities, and helping people in need reach their full potential through learning and the power of work. Each independent Goodwill affiliate will have a specialty area, some of which would be blindness and visual impairment, which happens to be ours, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, traumatic brain injury, developmental disabilities, mental illness, deafness or hearing, criminal background, and many others. So Goodwill of the Finger Lakes, which is the Goodwill that we are part of, located in upstate New York, specializes on vision rehabilitation and vocational rehabilitation for individuals who are blind and visually impaired through the Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, ABVI. We do job training and work experience for individuals with other barriers also. We have an information and referral service through AIR's accredited 211 contact center, which is also a 24/7 crisis management and American Association of Suicidology accredited suicide hotline. One of the centers that also answers the veteran suicide hotline. And we are the disability partner to the National AgrAbility project. So our social enterprise of stores includes 12 retail locations. Our manufacturing department, which manufactures Skillcraft brand of Post-it notes. We do sewing for the US military, we do soap packaging, and a few other things. We have a contact center where our 211 Lifeline is hosted, but that also serves state, federal, and commercial contracts. And we have a food service division, which provides 1,200 plus meals daily to senior centers and daycare centers. And so now I am going to pass it over to Jobeth Rath, who is going to talk some more about cognitive impairments in farming.
Thanks, Tess. So in cognitive impairments, we talk about the reasons for them being vast, but the symptoms being similar. And in farming, one of the things we note is that the age of the farmer is growing year by year. That age is going up. And so we have to be pretty aware that some of the things that are related to cognitive impairments are age related. So early onset Alzheimer's, dementia, those kinds of things. So when we look at cognitive issues, we talk about short-term memory deficit, slowed information processing, problems with abstract conceptualization, and then just attention deficit. For some, these might be too challenging to have a place in farming, but we have many farms that have created models that allow for people to work safely in these environments. And that's what we really want to the goal to be in AgrAbility is not just people get back to work, but they get back to work safely. Go ahead, Tess. So when we look at the age of the US farmer in 2017, that age was averaged at 59.4 years. And that number's been increasing consistently over the last 4 decades. So we don't expect it to go down real soon, although we are trying to get young farmers engaged. So while age is that primary risk factor, the other things we look at are things like family history, education level, brain injury, and then things that we come across in farming are exposure to pesticides or toxins, and then other chronic conditions that might be Parkinson's, heart disease, stroke, diabetes that can contribute to this. So as AgrAbility specialists, we take that whole person approach and we want to be looking for any other factors that might be impairing somebody's ability to do something and considering all of those risks and secondary risks. Often we think of the first thing we see, and so maybe it's someone in a wheelchair and we're talking about lifts to get them in their tractor, but if we don't pay attention to other issues that they're having that might impact their ability to remember what to do or how to do it, we would be setting them up for secondary injury. Go ahead, Tess. So one of the things we look at with short-term memory deficit is really creating order and reducing frustration. So anyone that has memory deficit, and that could be inclusive of people that have age-related issues, it could be a brain injury issue, or it could be a developmental disability. But we always want to make sure that spaces are organized so that there isn't a frustration of having to remember how to find something, where something is going to be, that it's always in the same place. So in an environment where multiple people work and one person may need something in a certain place, we need to make sure everybody's trained to do that. And I know Margie will touch on this because this kind of goes with visual impairment too, that if we don't put things back where they go, people can't find them and it creates some problems, frustrations, inefficiencies. The other thing we think about with cognitive impairments is how do we get people to remember things that they did or they need to do? So one of the things we leverage are smartphone applications or even tablets. We have an AgrAbility client in the Midwest who talks about his iPad as his brain. He did have a brain injury and he often, puts in his iPad, like when he changed the oil, because when he first started back on his farm after his injury, he was realizing he was doing things like multiple days in a row because he didn't remember that he had done it the day before. So it took him a little while to admit, I don't remember those things. And he created his brain, he calls it, in his iPad. So there are a lot of apps that can be useful. And I know in farming, sometimes technology isn't the most popular thing, but with a smartphone, someone can carry in their pocket a device that can help them create lists, calendar reminders, alarms, and that could be for anything to, you need to feed something, you need to immunize something, you need to do this, you need to be at this place. So we really encourage people to take advantage of that. And camera, something as simple as a camera on a phone, just being able to take a picture of what something's supposed to look like when it's done or when it's fixed or when the belt is put on the right way, so they don't have to reach back to their memory to try to figure out how to do that. So we want to make sure we're creating those environments where people can have memory or feel like they have memory using these devices. Go ahead, Tess. Slowed information processing is probably the key to why farm safety experts would say people with cognitive issues shouldn't be on a farm. It's dangerous when we have all of our faculties with us, but if you are slow to process things, you may not realize that an animal is coming at you. You may not realize that to get out of the way of a vehicle or a piece of farm equipment. So what we want to make sure is that we're thinking about that and creating really safe and solid places for people to move livestock, for example, and that can be done fairly easily with gates and chutes. And making sure that the individual is not kind of in the mix of the cattle or the goats or whatever they're trying to move. So just keeping humans and livestock separate so that that reaction time and that information processing doesn't become as big of an issue from a safety perspective. And then clear and consistent boundaries, and again, this will overlap with vision, is we need to make sure that people understand this path is only for equipment, or the feeder can only go down this aisle during certain hours, so that people know when it's safe to be walking and there's not that need to be always jumping for machinery. And I think every time we all see a farm accident that happens when someone has been hurt or killed by a piece of equipment, we all think, oh, that was so preventable. But in the reality of day-to-day life and working long weeks and long hours, things get a little bit dismantled on our farms, and we don't follow the rules. But in these cases, when you have somebody that has, you know, a difficult time processing information, you want to be incredibly careful that if they're in that environment, it's set up that they can time it out. Next one's this. And then we want to talk about just safety. So the processing and attention deficit come into play, that tasks can get overwhelming. People can get kind of lost in what they were going to be doing or should be doing. And so this is where we have to say we really have to clearly outline tasks. And the best example I've heard is an elderly dairy farmer who'd been on that farm, like born and raised on that farm, and then his family took it over. So he was in his late 70s, but had memory issues, probably Alzheimer's. And they were like, we need to go milk the cows. And he could not remember how to do that. And so they had to really make him like a pictorial map of what steps he had to take to milk the cows. And so even something that somebody has done for a long period of time, if they sustain a brain injury or they start to have problems with aging, dementia, those kinds of things, or have a stroke, they may need tasks broken into very small parts that were tasks that they once completed before. So we want to make sure that tasks are broken into small parts and that they can understand each step. I think a lot of farms that we've looked at specialize in helping people with autism or similar developmental issues. And we often look at that, and you will see them break tasks into small parts, and each person does the same small part every day. So sometimes the gift of a cognitive issue or a developmental issue is you don't mind that repetitive thing that might make other people dislike the job. So we just want to make sure that we're thinking about all of these things, but primarily keeping people safe. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Margie. We're going to start talking about vision, and she'll kick that off right with safety.
All right, thank you, JoBeth. So safety and productivity with visual impairments. We have to protect what we have. So Prevent Blindness America estimates 90% of injuries are preventable. So selecting appropriate protection from the sun, particles, sparks, and chemicals is key. So whether that's wearing the proper safety goggles when dealing with toxic chemicals, or wearing a brimmed hat when you're out in the sun, those simple things can really impact the safety of your eyes and prolong your vision if you have a visual impairment. Go ahead, Tess. So moving safely around the farm. Support and mobility canes can provide stability and introduce changes to ground grade and texture, as well as detect obstacles. So if you think about walking around on a farm, you know, there might be some buckets on the ground or things not in a nice and tidy position. So with someone with a visual impairment, those items are hard to detect. Because they can't visually connect with them, the cane acts as that detection point. So sliding the cane back and forth, they would be able to identify that there's something in their path. So these are recommended for majority of individuals with visual impairments, and they can be in the form of a long cane or a support cane, depending on the need of the individual and how fast their rate of walking determines the type of cane that they're going to be dispensed. All of these types of things, we recommend you working with an orientation and mobility specialist who really assesses the needs of the individual and identifies the cane that's going to work best for them. You can go ahead, Tess. With that being said, although the cane itself is pretty simplistic, the different tips that go on the end can really identify different substances or surfaces that you're crossing over. So for example, there's a large, it's called a Dakota disc that's on the screen right now. And it's a big circle. And that circle would sway across easily on a snow, like if it's snowing, snow banks, it would detect those. But if you were on rough ground, you might want something that's a little bit more of a rolling ball tip. That rolling ball is going to glide across those surfaces a little easier, and it'll identify obstacles in your way. So if there's a drop off, the cane is going to go down the drop off, and it's going to notify you before you get to it. There's also on this slide a long, like hockey stick looking cane tip, and that's really good for traveling on uneven ground and in rugged terrain. So all of those things an orientation and mobility specialist would be able to identify for the individual, and it's really based on their needs. So, okay, Tess, thank you. So moving safely around the farm, high visibility tapes and paints can be used to identify obstacles, mark steps, categorize tools, outline work areas, and much, much more. So like JoBeth said, keeping tasks in a specific spot or having equipment travel down one-way paths and identifying that with a visual marker. People that have some usable vision can connect with those high contrast marks and realize maybe that's not a safe place for me to go, or maybe there's a step off that I might want to slow down my my pace before I get to that drop off point. Go ahead, Tess. So moving safely around the farm continued. So a tennis ball hanging from rafters or ceilings can indicate that the appropriate spot has been reached when parking farm vehicles. So a tennis ball might be too small for some individuals that have a visual impairment, that they might need to have a larger ball or a more high contrast ball. But ultimately, making sure that the individual that's driving the vehicle is safe doing so. If their visual impairment has impeded so much that they are not allowed to drive, maybe reassigning that task or doing some trial runs to see if it's actually safe and appropriate for that individual to continue. If you have lower hanging beams or fixtures or tree branches for that matter, hanging some sort of visual indicator such as burlap or a high contrast flag as a reminder that you're going to have to duck your head when you're approaching those low hanging objects. If you're wearing a hat, burlap tends to grip onto that hat a little bit easier. So it kind of almost pulls you back and makes you realize, hey, I do need to duck my head for this where I'm approaching. Keeping walkways clear. So for individuals with limited vision, they're not going to be able to easily identify large objects in their way, or even small objects for that matter. So making sure that the walkway is clear and that it's clearly identified too. So whether that's high visibility paint, tape, making sure we're identifying ramps and steps so that way individuals can fully get along or get around the farm independently. Go ahead, Tess. So bringing it back to the workspace or workbench area, everything in its place is key. So organization is going to be a huge, it's going to make a huge difference for individuals with visual impairment. So organizing tools, feed, and maintaining the spaces for easily location of items. So whether that's keeping frequently used items in the workspace closer to you and those not frequently used further back, or even creating a system of marking. So say you have regular versus a Phillips head screwdriver, marking the all of the Phillips screwdrivers with a rubber band on the handle, while all the regular screwdrivers don't have a marking. So that's just an easy way to pick up an item and kind of know what you're working with. So whether that's Phillips or regular or metric versus US measurements. You can use high contrast tape in that situation as well. And that's really just to easily identify the tools that you work with every day. Clearly marking feeds and supplements, storing in bins versus bags is just a simple modification or accommodation that you can make in your area. And also using large print labels. So I always say larger is not always better. So depending on the individual with vision loss, really talk to them and see what's going to work best for them on that farm. So large print might work well with some individuals, while a smaller print might work better for different individuals. Go ahead, Tess. So there's a lot of tools out there designated or made for individuals with vision loss, such as talking tape measures, talking thermometers, talking calculators, talking watches, even talking scales. So depending on what the need of the individual that's on the farm is, you can really shop around and see what's out there. Check into a local agency that might be working with individuals that are blind. They tend to have a good resource where they purchase equipment from. There's also things such as talking label wands in this picture. And that's really just this device that you can record labels onto. So say you have chicken feed and you can't actually read the label chicken feed. You could record the words chicken feed on a sticker and then stick it on that box. You would then take the pen and hover over it, and it would actually auditorily read it back to you. So there's really a tool out there for everyone. It's just dependent on the individual's needs. And again, reach out to a local community. Here at ABVI, Goodwill of the Finger Lakes, we have professionals on our staff that go out and really assess the needs and kind of create a plan or a toolkit that's going to work best based on the type of vision loss. Go ahead, Tess. So lighting. Work areas and hallways should be well lit. Depending on the type of vision loss, different hues of lights may be effective for different spaces. Also, depending on the type of vision loss you have, bright lights might not be the best thing. It might create too much glare. So really knowing what type of vision loss you're working with and trying a few things out. It's trial and error. Seeing what's going to work best, if it's causing headaches, if it's causing too much glare or shine off the floor, try a different light bulb, try a different strength of light bulb. With that being said, motion activated lights on a timer for lights, they reduce hazards when you're trying to locate switches to turn on and off the lights. They're also just a cool technology that when you walk into maybe your barn, the lights turn on, they're motion censored. You can even do the timers. My parents use timers all the time. Their lights come on at 7 o'clock at night, regardless if it's rain, shine, sleet, or snow. So that's a really cool technology that you can use. Go ahead, Tess. So speaking of technology, leveraging technology, video monitoring systems allow monitoring of livestock, land, equipment, and buildings through a tablet, phone, or computer, eliminating the travel on the farm. So those are really great for individuals that have some mobility issues, using the technology that they can sit from their couch and check in on their livestock, see what's going on. The Amazon Echo or Echo Dot can provide weather details, time and date information. It can be attached to lighting to allow voice commands for turning on lights or turning off lights. They even have, I mean, there's so much technology out there. The Amazon Echo can really do so much. It could even turn on a microwave if you have the Alexa microwave. So it's not only good for on the farm use, but it could be good for something inside your house too. Digital magnifiers can be small enough to carry in a pocket. And the features allow users to modify contrast of items being viewed. So it's the ability to capture an image with a camera as well as text-to-speech options. So there's so much technology out there, and these digital magnifiers can be the size of your phone. They can zoom in on items. They can change the contrast, which is a huge benefit for individuals with visual impairments. I mean, the iPhone, the Android phone, everything that you use day to day or that you could be using day to day can really work at magnifying objects, at using apps. And I think that takes us to our next slide test, if you don't mind. So smartphone apps can assist with mobility, item identification, color identification, and more. So a couple apps on this page here are, I mean, there's a talking calculator app. There's an app called Blind Square, which really talks about travel, and not only like a Google Maps travel, but specific items that might come in your way or specific identifiers. Maybe when you're walking down the street, it lets you know you're passing Target. So you could use that on your farm, and you can create little reminders of what you're passing. I'm passing the barn. I'm passing the chicken coop, something of that sort. There's another app on this page called Be My Eyes, and that actually connects you with a sighted volunteer. So you pull up the app, you show them what's going on in your world around you, and a sighted individual would actually explain what it is that's occurring. So that could be useful for changing items on your tractor. If you're not sure, maybe your belt's on the right way, you can ask someone that has sight to make that connection for you. And then there's something such as something a little bit simpler called the color identifier app, and that actually just detects colors. So it tells you if your shirt's blue, if your pants are green, but you could use that in other instances too. So if you're trying to match paint, if you're trying to make sure you're grabbing the right binder that's color coded, something along that sort. Go ahead, Tess. That's it. So
that brings us back, and I just want to wrap it up with Margie referred a few times to asking the right professional. So we would always advocate for any of these tools, although you can order many of them online. We would always advocate that a professional be consulted anytime one of these devices is going to be used, not just because people couldn't pick them up and use them, but because there is some training that is necessary to make them the most effective and the safest, and to maximize the use that they have with them. So we always encourage, there are vision rehab therapists that are certified like Margie. There are certified orientation mobility specialists. We have, other specialists we work with that specialize in traumatic brain injury and memory loss. We want to bring opportunities to people, but we also want to bring people safe ways to use those opportunities. So we would encourage you always to kind of leverage the professionals you have. I know our AgrAbility partners work with vocational rehabilitation organizations. I know we have at least one partner who has been part of their state's blind services organization. So make sure you're connecting with those people, because there's so many resources available, and you want to get people the maximum that they can for what their disability is. And those are the resources that will really help you get there. We could all search Amazon and a lot of online vendors to find what we need, but knowing how to use it isn't always as obvious as that. So with that, I think we'll take any questions. If you have anything else, Margie?
So I did want to piggyback off that, Jo Beth. So most blindness agencies that focus on helping individuals that have a visual impairment really individualize the service to that person that's struggling. So we actually, as a certified vision rehabilitation therapist myself, I go out to individuals' homes and really see what is going to work well for them. So some of the stuff that we discussed, it might not be right for the individual you're working with. So again, just reiterating the fact that Jo Beth said, just reach out to your local organization or to a professional in the field.
So I think we can end this session today by thanking our presenters, Tess McKeagle, Joe Berrat, and Margie Bendy Sandy. It was very, very interesting topic. I really enjoy it, and I guess everybody else too. And thank you very much for that presentation and for sharing your knowledge with us.